Hello, everyone. This is Totes My Goats here. Just wanted to post another update around my fake ruts or instant ruts tutorial. It's coming along pretty well. As you can see, there's been quite a few changes to the approach that's affected the result. Also added some color to help visualize this a little bit more. So yeah, let's go ahead and talk through these changes so that you can see what's been done. So first off, if you've been following the tutorial, then you obviously know what we're looking at here when it comes to the layout mask that we're currently using. This is just kind of demonstrate how we started out with the original layout. And we're going to use this going forward in some capacity, but basically this is just going to be your track layout that you've drawn around your height map. Again, in the past, we've demonstrated that you can show the height map and draw your mask with the height map in view. So it kind of lets you choose your layout a little bit more specifically based on the terrain that you're dealing with, which I think is a really fun feature or a great thing to have. And yeah, obviously, when you make changes, you'll be able to see them pretty quickly. I am running a 4K build right now, or at least 4K viewport. So it is taking a little longer. I'm going to switch this down to 2K. And I was slightly stalling for that to build before I moved on. Okay, so as you've probably seen in the past, we have our height map, which is being displayed here. When we come over to this new graph that I've created, it's called, I just labeled it sign mask. So again, to create a graph, which just kind of allows you to organize things and put them into different places. I didn't rename my original one, but this is just kind of the original height map that I created to begin with. I created a new graph because I think we've talked about the sign mask in the past. So the first node that I've created in here is called the reduced track layout. So if I just hit F2, that's what I've named it, reduced track layout. And all that's doing is taking the layout mask here, this image, and it's shrinking it down about half. Is really what that does. So I do that because it's a little too big to begin with for what this purpose is. Basically, just kind of shrinking it down to kind of put the ruts more inside the track versus on the outside or on the edges where we have some of the rocks and roughness that's more natural looking. So I do this just to kind of get that shape started. And then another thing that we've done, which we've talked about, is this sign mask. And so that's literally just the sign node being used at about 10%. And I changed the shape around a little bit to control how wide I want it. I blur it out just a tiny bit to soften the edges. Then I auto level it and clip it to make it very kind of black and white, or, very gray, if you will. So yeah, those are pretty important pieces to start with. Those are just an FX node that I've used to start with here. Sorry, I didn't mention that in the very beginning. And then the sign node, which I've talked about before. So yeah, if you just look at this name, again, it's an FX node. You can grab that from here. Okay, so the ruts graph is really what I want to highlight, and then we'll get to the final output. So looking at this particular graph, again, just reusing these FX nodes. I talked about reducing the track layout. I think I wanted about half the width for some other purposes, so I left that there. But for the ruts, I wanted it very small. I played around with a few things like you saw in one of my previous tutorials, and I kind of wanted the ruts to be a little tinier, basically more detailed. So figured out a way to display that a little better. So you're just going to take your reduced track layout mask, you're going to reduce it again by about half, get it to another node that's an FX node, reduce it by about half, the shaper. We'll do another FX node, you're going to reduce it by about half, and then you're also going to turn on the diff. And then that'll allow you to get the difference that's still available, I guess, on the edge. I'm trying to think of exactly what that calculates. Don't worry. Select diff. Then you'll start to see it go from, a single solid trail to almost like a split trail now. And then I feed it one more time to another FX node, which I've relabeled rut starter. And then this one I've actually changed in the post processing to reduce it. I think that gave me a little bit better look than doing it in the node properties. So basically taking whatever comes out of here and then just shaping it down. I chose to just organize this a specific way. You don't have to do that. I imagine you could probably put the post processing in here. Maybe I didn't do that because of the differential here, or the difference blend mode. But anyway, got your starter ruts. Just make sure you reduce those in the post processing by about half. And then what we're going to do is take these starter ruts, which is just this, and we're going to change it to a logarithmic effect. And then we're going to increase the shape. So that's what I found works pretty well. Again, this could very much depend on how big your track is, how big your mask is to begin with, or how big these ruts are. So this approach is a good start. Again, you can probably drop in as many of these as you need. I found that it got to a certain point and it just stopped doing things that I needed it to do. So yeah, about 4 of them. I did this about 4 times. So you take one, do it again, refeed that into a logarithmic scale, increase the shape. Keep doing that. Log, increase the shape. Log, increase the shape. So you end up with these lines. And then, yeah, log, increase the shape for the final node. And then the post processing, log, clip, and diff it. So all of that's kind of giving you more variance, or kind of more, lines, I'd say, or kind of, as well as cleaning up the lines. Without some of this stuff, like logging it, I feel like you don't get quite the smooth colors. Like some will be a little more white on one line, which, as you start to add these on top of each other, will, maybe probably not give you exactly what you want, but experiment with it. It's not the only way to do this. I just wanted to give people an idea, right? Like you can see as you add this stuff how it's changing your mask, and if you're familiar with how your mask is being used, then you'll be able to recognize, okay, that's doing what I want it to do. Don't be afraid to leave some of this out or tweak it to be a little different than what you want. Once I get a full track width of ruts built, just like you see here, I rename it, or kind of keep it as my rut full effects, and make that a portal. So you can see these outputs. These are just a portal. If you didn't catch that in my last tutorial, the way to make a node a portal is to drag it out and then select make portal. This says remove portal, but it'll say make portal. And that's going to turn this into a portal, which then when you have a node, you can just select what you want to input from your portals dropdown. You don't have to actually drag and connect your nodes around. So it'll speed things up a little bit for you, or kind of help keep your view a bit more organized. So anyway, I make that a portal once that's done. And now I have my whole rut path that I want to use. We talked about this in the last one, I think, but basically you're just going to take this rut path and displace them, over and over and over. And I think what I found to be the best is just a very low strength, very low scale, very low complexity. You can play with the iterations, you can play with the method if you want. But ultimately, all of these are very low changes in terms of how much it's displacing. I wasn't getting quite the result I wanted if I displaced it a lot. So ultimately, displacing it a little bit gave me the result that I wanted. Okay, yeah. So going from there, I just take one of these nodes, combine it, and you just gotta play with it, right? So like I selected min as my first one here. It's only going to take the minimum values, or when they cross over, basically I believe keeps the minimum value. So I felt like that was kind of giving me an interesting texture. So taking one rut path and another rut path, slightly displaced, and then running it over and sort of clawing out part of it, just by doing it that way. And then again, a slightly different approach, maybe maxing it. So yeah, now just keeping the max line value that comes through, and you can see it's starting to give me some depth for some lines and then some height for some others. So I was very pleased to see that sort of blend technique work out. But you do that a couple times, and I was just repeating myself or kind of going back and forth. So min 100%, and then another. And then here's where I did something kind of different. So on the final one, to blend it all in, I did a multiply. I was kind of looking at this, and as I got further into my tutorial, or down the path, I realized that this just wasn't quite giving. This was very uh, on the nose with how the ruts were looking. I guess it's very direct, and I felt like adding one more layer there where we multiply it, which currently looks really dark. And so if you just go to the next node, which is this effects node. Oh, looks like I didn't do anything for that. Anyway, we'll skip that one. Maybe I'll just click blur. And so we blurred it. I think the reason why I was looking at this a little earlier or in a different way is because I had the enhanced view. So remember to turn this on if you can't really see things that well. That'll kind of help you see the variance a bit better. So yeah, let's go back to this combine node. You can see it multiply it with 100% compared to this node. And I just felt like that kind of gave me another good, I don't know, scratch in the surface there. Ignore this FX node. I'm not quite sure what I'm doing with that. And then, just to kind of blur in these edges or these lines a little bit nicer, one with a smooth type of blur. Next step is the rock noise, which we talked about in the last one. So again, just using the same approach with the mask. I think the biggest difference now with this approach is just how the mask was created with this rock noise, or I'm sorry, before the rock noise was applied. And you can see it's kind of got this very interesting texture that it generates in the height map. And I'm just generating it right now onto a flat surface. We'll take that. We're going to displace it a tad. Not much, maybe 1%. Didn't really do too much. And then I took it and I did the same thing, right? Displaced it. And then I inverted it to kind of give it a little bit more of a wavy look and inset it into the ground. This was more of my preference of how I wanted it to look in the long run. So you don't have to do this step, but when I combine these, this is just what it gave me. So you start with this, kind of move it around or whatever, and then you end up with this. So here's the initial and what I ended up with. And again, we're just going for some subtle ruts, right? We're not going to put these ruts into the height map unless you want to. You're probably going to, I don't know if you'll enjoy that very much, but this will just kind of create that subtle texture that you're seeing here. Yeah, final step, do a little bit of blurring. I think that looks pretty good overall. And that's going to be your ruts graph output. Okay, so you'll make that a portal. And then on the final height map, which I think we talked about in the past, we've got this node that we use to take our final output. Again, just to recap, I added this little berm here just to show some tweaks I made in Leveler. Then I've also got this jump over here. And then we took that out of Leveler, and then we started kind of tweaking that. Well, basically, we took some primitive height map from Gaea. We generated that. Then we went into Leveler. We built up our terrain, and then we came back in and we put it into this file. That's what we ended up with from Leveler. And then now we've got, some rock noise that we've added to the edge to kind of rough up the edge of the terrain. So you can see here, like going back to the file, there was none. And then we added some rough edges. Yeah, and then the next step would be to combine your ruts in with your height map. And so that's just a combine that I did with an add of 100% into the height map. And then I only did that using the reduced track layout mask. So I only want this to basically show up here. In some ways, the displacement might push the ruts a little bit further outside of the track. In that situation, I masked it off so that it's very tight and clean with the track. And so, if we kind of scroll around and look, I think a lot of people would be pretty pleased with these results, especially if you're not super familiar with how to create textures and stuff. I thought this was just a really cool thing I found. But yeah, so now we have our height map built. Again, I don't really recommend putting these ruts into your height map. Maybe even I wouldn't even recommend putting a rock noise into your height map. So that's kind of what I think is really cool about this workflow. You can, if you want, put that in there. Again, test it out, see what you like. But what's nice is you can make all those changes to your file, and as long as your leveler height map, and as long as you are following the same layout that you started with, and putting your jumps in the correct spot, all that stuff is going to translate very well once you refresh this node, and want to see how it, starts taking effect. So yeah, we've applied our ruts here to the terrain. And I guess it's time to maybe pause this tutorial. I'll come back with another tutorial to talk about some of the other tweaks just related to normals and the spec maps that you can try to do if you'd like, as well as some of the vegetation too.